Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're counting down the top 10 small towns to visit in Pennsylvania. In this state, small towns are known as boroughs as opposed to villages in New York. So we will only be counting incorporated boroughs, meaning we will not count cities like Sunbury or Oil City, or unincorporated places like Hershey, or even the one official town in the state, Bloomsburg. Now, for the record, there are 956 boroughs in Pennsylvania, which is a gigantic amount. I've currently been to 385 of them, but there are so many small towns nestled in all the linear mountains of the Appalachian Range, and really just all over the state, except maybe the north central part. For those who know Pennsylvania well, some of these will be no surprise to you. But I do differ from some of the lists around the internet. But as you'll probably guess, many of these are in the eastern part of the Commonwealth. And once again, there are no metrics to this list. I'm just picking my favorites and hopefully convincing you to agree. So let's get started and get right to number 10. We start in the county seat of Bucks County, in the borough of Doylestown. This is pretty much right in the center of the county, which extends from the Philadelphia city line towards Trenton, New Jersey, and then stretches north nearly to the Lehigh Valley. And recently, there's been a big Bucks County tourism campaign with TV commercials all around the northeastern United States. You can check out their YouTube channel if you haven't seen them. Doylestown itself is well known as a tourist town, although it's not completely overrun with tourists, at least in my experience. I've been there twice, but that was before I started this channel, and I didn't take pictures, so I'll be relying on Google for the images here. It's known for having a nice, quaint, walkable downtown with businesses spanning several different streets in several different directions, and different kinds of residential zones surrounding it. And notably, there's the Fonthill Castle, less than a mile north of the center of town, which makes it into these Bucks County commercials. I don't usually put towns that are completely landlocked onto lists like these, but Doylestown is certainly a place people like to visit, and I can certainly agree with that. For number 9, we head to Lancaster County, to a borough that usually hits the top 5 in many online lists. While Lancaster is the big city in the area, there are plenty of substantial boroughs around the region, and the one that everyone talks about is Lidditz. It's pretty much in the heart of one of the few regions in the state without mountains, and instead one filled with farms. And it's well known for its Amish and Mennonite communities. For me, as a person who bikes around a lot, I don't quite see the appeal of this place as much as others do. And I do think most lists overrate this place, but I understand why people like it. From what I see, some of the main attractions are Main Street, the Moravian Historic District, and Lidditz Springs Park, which, according to the signage, is home to one of the most iconic July 4th celebrations. Anyway, let me know in the comments what you like about Lidditz. I think I need to spend a little more time there. Now, I want to be clear. I absolutely love Pittsburgh, and find the whole region so intriguing to explore. So many of the cities and towns along the river have very old industrial infrastructures, but have greatly suffered economically. And many of them look like absolute shells of their former selves, especially cities like McKeesport, New Kensington, and Clairton. As for the boroughs, many of them have a gritty ambience, but don't necessarily have a ton of uniqueness to them. If you're exploring the area for a while, do check out places like Sewickley, Braddock, or Mount Oliver, just to name a few. I'd even recommend watching Dean Boggs' YouTube channel for more in-depth exploration of the Pittsburgh region. But on this list, there is one borough that does stand out as unique, about 40 miles up the Allegheny River, and that borough is Kittening. And to convince you it's interesting, just look at it. Downtown is set up to look grand, with a bevy of old buildings and gritty stores leading up to the classic county courthouse, and it's all surrounded by the short mountains of the Allegheny River. It has all the makings of an old industrial western Pennsylvania town, but it's not as derelict as some of the towns closer to Pittsburgh. Most of the land seems to be used up, and things don't seem to be falling apart. While it's sort of close to Pittsburgh, it's really the center of its own region, being the county seat of Armstrong County, and the nearby boroughs of West Kittening, Applewold, and the similar-looking Ford City all seem to revolve around it, so it has a sense of grandeur and certainly feels unique. So when you're taking a small town tour of Pennsylvania, make sure you stop here and see for yourself. For the next borough, we head to another economically depressed region with a remarkable history, the coal region. also known as the Anthracite region, or Anthracite Coal region. If you live there, comment what you call the region. This region is nestled in the mountains, with tons of ups and downs between small coal towns with small community atmospheres, gridded streets, and spoil tips all around. I can't think of another region anywhere in the northeastern United States anything like this, and you've got to see it for yourself. My favorite borough in the western part of this region is Mount Carmel. This town is located high up in the hills, in a bowl surrounded by more mountains on all sides, so it feels completely cut off from the rest of society. However, it's the largest town in the area, so it sort of functions as a crossroads in the region. And over the hills in every direction, there are smaller coal towns. Also notably, Mount Carmel was one of the towns that people evacuated to from nearby Centralia. For those unfamiliar with that story, Centralia is a borough about 3 miles east of Mount Carmel that has an ongoing underground mine fire and now has essentially become a ghost town. And many of the residents from there were forced to move south to Ashland or west to Mount Carmel. So there's that. And looking at the satellite map, you can clearly see all the coal mine areas and spoil tips. But even with all that, this, in my opinion, is a pretty nice looking town with a substantial feel, and I hope you get to see it for yourself and explore the area at some point. Now I want to hit another town in the Philadelphia region. Many towns in the counties surrounding Philly are growing, and in my opinion, some of these towns have seemingly outgrown their historic centers, like Newtown, Malvern, Narberth, Jenkintown, or Conshohocken, just to name a few. But if I had to pick one borough that's certainly growing with lots of housing being built, but still maintaining the semblance of a coherent town, I would pick Phoenixville. This town sits along the Schuylkill River in Chester County, and its historic center is bounded by the French Creek and Route 23, despite considerable sprawl from the Philadelphia area. Unfortunately, I also visited this place before I started this channel, and there's also a street fair, so I have none of my own pictures, but hopefully this'll do. There are old houses, nice parks, nature preserves, and close connections to any kind of area you want, whether it be urban, suburban, or rural. It's right between Philadelphia and Reading, and it's right next to Valley Forge, the famous Revolutionary War site. And the University of Valley Forge is just outside town, and Ursinus College is nearby as well. So there's plenty going on in the area, although it's definitely not known as a small town, at least anymore. But hopefully, I've convinced you that it belongs on this list. It's finally time to check out a town along one of the branches of the mighty Susquehanna River. Just a few miles west of where the West Branch meets the main branch is the charming borough of Lewisburg. It's well known for being the home to Bucknell University, of which some of the campus is technically in town. It's also the county seat of Union County, a very rural farming county of less than 50,000 people. It's a beautiful little river town, although, since the river is quite prone to flooding, there's not a ton of great access to the water or nice river views, but it still clearly influences the way the whole town's set up. Like most substantial boroughs in PA, the historic downtown is still along the river, and surrounding it on the inland side is your arterial roads with all the fast food and box stores. But being a college town, you can expect that. Not to mention, there's also a prison 2 miles north of town, so despite being in a rural area, this borough does have a considerable footprint, and you're not too far away from most of your necessities. There are bike trails that go through town, and you can easily commute to other small towns and cities like Williamsport or Sunbury. And finally, downtown is filled with old-fashioned buildings, and even the houses around town look interesting. And this place doesn't have any sort of run-down feel. At least in my experience, it looks like a well-kept-up place, and you should definitely check it out. Right in the center of the Commonwealth is Centre County, which, of course, is well known for being the home to State College, the largest borough in Pennsylvania, and the home to Penn State University. That town is really crowded, though, and it's growing rapidly. So if you want a charming town in the Happy Valley region, but out of the hustle and bustle of State College, check out Bellefonte, the county seat, about 9 miles to the northeast. No major rivers run through it, but it abuts mountains to the north. But as a seat of a major county in central Pennsylvania, it has a very nice courthouse and commercial streets leading up to it, just like in Kittening. Except this town also has another commercial street in a different direction. That's Allegheny Street. But this borough just seems shockingly nice considering it's overlooked in the region, and many residents probably commute to State College. And despite just the small Spring Creek running through town, it has nice parks along it, and some signs of old industry. That's about all I have to say about it, but this place is certainly a hidden gem. We're getting to the obvious ones now. Number 3, New Hope. New Hope is a very popular destination for tourists, especially from New York and New Jersey, and it sits across the Delaware River from its counterpart, Lambertville, New Jersey. And once again, we're back in Bucks County. Now, these two towns across the river work really well as a pair. Lambertville appears to be the older town, and I believe actually is older, and it has the bigger feel, gridded streets, and is known as a popular antiquing destination. Meanwhile, New Hope, on the other hand, is smaller, and it seems to have more of the restaurants and nightlife, and has more of the tourist attractions like the Bucks County Playhouse and the New Hope and Ivyland Railroad. Now, there isn't a ton of real estate downtown, so most of the businesses are set up linearly along Main Street for over a half mile, and most people are walking along that stretch in a manner very similar to Provincetown, Massachusetts. I will admit that I have heard sources comparing this place to Provincetown without the beaches, but let me know in the comments if you can see that comparison, or if you think that's completely ridiculous. The one problem with this place is that since most of the flat land along the river is occupied, most of the new development is in large suburban housing developments on the hills here. So I don't know what the future looks like for this area, but you can easily enjoy spending plenty of time cavorting around New Hope and Lambertville, so come visit and enjoy yourself. Westchester is clearly one of the best boroughs in the Commonwealth to visit and explore. It is landlocked, and it doesn't have any major geographic features, but it is a charming town, with interesting buildings and culture pretty much at every turn, sitting in the rolling hills of Chester County. It is a suburb of Philadelphia, about 9 miles north of the state line with Delaware, and it sits along some important roads like US 202 and 322, so many people drive by, and there can be considerable traffic into and out of town. It is home to Westchester University, so it has all the stores, food, and infrastructure of a college town. It's also the county seat, and it has some large government buildings throughout town. The streets are mostly gridded with alleys, so it has a very historic feel, but there's a lot to do in town. And it also has all the shopping centers outside town, and it seems to be an overall great place to live as well. As for tourist attractions, they've got their own scenic railway, Revolutionary War history, the childhood home of American composer Samuel Barber, and two of my absolute favorite pizzerias. Check out Lorenzo's and Benny's. And with some nice quiet parks right in town and interesting houses, this is really an incredible place, and I know you will agree when you visit. Alright, if I haven't named your favorite boroughs yet, hopefully I named them here, in the 10 honorable mentions list. Some of these places I really do like, but some of them are obligatory, like Punxsutawney, which is famous for the whole Groundhog Day thing, but there's a reason they passed up filming the famous movie there, because it's not that great. Huntington also once ranked number 5 of coolest small town in America, but I think it's okay. I'm sure many of you will disagree with me putting Bristol, Berwick, Sayre, or Charleroi on this list, but please let me know in the comments your favorite boroughs that I didn't include. But now, for those of you who know Pennsylvania well, using process of elimination, it should be very obvious what the number 1 borough on this list is. It is the one, the only, Jim Thorpe. Yes, we are back in the coal region, in the county seat of Carbon County. But this borough is way more intact than the other towns in the region. It sits on the narrow Lehigh River, right as it cuts through the mountains, and the little town sits in the narrow valleys between some of the mountains, leading some people to refer to it as the Switzerland of America. I personally have not been to Switzerland, but you can be the judge for yourself. Now, the borough was originally a company town, like others in the region, and it was formed when the smaller boroughs of Mauch-Chunk and East Mauch-Chunk merged in the 1950s. Now, the town is basically split into 3 parts. The eastern side, which on the map looks like the main part of town, but that's actually misleading. It's actually on a pretty steep hill. And while it does appear to have most of the residential development in town, the only tourist attraction there is the actual burial site of the namesake, Jim Thorpe. It's a long and contentious story about how the Native American Olympic athlete came to be buried here, despite having no connection to the area. But the site is at the top of the hill if you want to see it. The main part of town is actually the west side of the river, with another large residential area on a mountain ridge here. But then, packed in the tiny valley here, is downtown. and that is where you find all the surprisingly grand buildings and the main attractions, shops, restaurants, museums, and hotels in town. This area can be packed, especially in the summer, with farmers markets, bike rentals, and people walking about. There are some fantastic bike trails in the area, including the Lehigh Gorge Trail and Lehigh Valley State Park, going north about 20 miles to Whitehaven, as well as trails going south along the Lehigh River, and then the Switchback Railroad Trail, which is a loop that train cars carrying coal used to take, powered by gravity. This trail goes west over to the next coal town of Summit Hill, but be careful because some parts atop the mountain were washed away when I biked it, so keep your eyes open. Then there's a park along the man-made Mauch-Chunk Lake, and also there's a ton of whitewater rafting all along this local stretch of the Lehigh River. Oh, and of course, there's yet another scenic railway that actually benefits many cyclists who take it one way towards Whitehaven and then bike downhill on the aforementioned trail back to Jim Thorpe afterwards. This place is truly amazing, and it functions as a hub for outdoor recreation, as well as a gateway to the coal region and Pocono region for tourists, and I hope I'm not surprising anyone by putting this number 1 on the list. If you haven't been, all I can say is, what are you waiting for? It's very remote, yet very close to both the Easton, Bethlehem, Allentown region and the Scranton region, so it's not far for most people in the major metros of New York and Philadelphia. So find a time to come visit Jim Thorpe, even if it's just a day trip, and maybe someday I'll see you there. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this list, and please let us know in the comments if you agree or disagree, and tell us your favorite boroughs in the state. Hopefully, I'll be able to do more of these countdowns for other states, and perhaps even up the ante and rank some of my favorite cities as well as small towns. In the meantime, more regular content coming up soon. Thanks for watching.